Hello again, it's Terry here for Tailored Expressions. I am so happy that you're joining me today. For today's project, I am sharing a vintage-inspired take on a card that I created using the wonderful Fittingly Floral stamp. So let's get started. Before we start, I would like to go over everything that I used for this project. I used cardstock in the colors Sugar Cube, Chocolate Truffle, and Toffee. The stamps and dies that I use are Fittingly Floral, Hello Spring, Rounded Rectangle Stacklets, and the Pierce Grid Cutting Plate. For inks, I am using VersaMark Ink Pad, Oreo, Saltwater Taffy, and Sour Gummy Ink Pad. I am using my blender brushes as well as Copic markers for coloring. I am also using white paint for splatters. I forgot to show that in the video here. To start off the project, I will be using the third size down from the rounded rectangle stacklets. I am cutting this out of Sugar Cube cardstock using my electric die cutting machine, but it will also work in a manual die cutting machine as well. Now, using my stamping platform, I placed the Sugar Cube rounded cardstock in with a magnet to secure it in place. The technique that I am going to show you works best with a stamping platform such as this mini MISTI. The Fittingly Floral set comes with 2 floral stamps. I am only using one of the stamps for this project. I placed the stamp towards the top of the rounded cardstock, making sure that the curve of the stamp was aligned with the curve of the cardstock. I then went in with my Oreo ink pad and inked up the stamp before I applied pressure to the platform with my Just Press It tool. I did have to ink it a few times to make sure that I had good coverage. Then I am going to remove my magnet and rotate my card 180 degrees. Doing this will allow the stamp image to be perfectly aligned on the opposite side of the cardstock without having to worry and fuss about the correct measurements. So after I rotated the cardstock, I am going to go ahead and do the exact same thing as earlier. Using Oreo ink pad, I ink the stamp and use my Just Press It tool to apply even pressure. Here you can see the outcome of the 180 degrees rotation using my stamping platform. Now it's time to add some colors to the stamped image. I am using alcohol markers to color the florals in. I like using a combination of 3 markers in the same color families to create dimension with my blending. I like to go in with the light tone first, then go in with the dark tone, and blend it together using the mid-tone. Going back and forth if needed to create an even blend. I went ahead and used the same process with each of the color families for this card. If you're interested in the colors I use, I will have it listed down below in the description. Okay, now to add a little bit of interest to the outer edge of the card panel. I am using my blender brush with Saltwater Taffy ink pad. I am applying light blending around the edges of the rounded rectangle. Then using a white gel pen, I am adding highlights and details throughout the card panel. To add some layers to the overall design, I am using the second frame from the rounded rectangle stacklets and die cutting that out of Chocolate Truffle cardstock. I am going to mat my card panel on top of the Chocolate Truffle cardstock using liquid adhesive. Now to create the background, I'm using Toffee colored cardstock and die cutting that out of the Pierce Grid Cutting Plates. So at this point, I was looking at the card panel and I felt that I needed to add a little more depth onto the card panel. So I pulled out Sour Gummy ink pad and used my blender brush to brush some ink around the edges of the card panel. I went ahead and adhered the pieces together using liquid adhesive. Now for the sentiment. I placed Chocolate Truffle cardstock into my stamping platform and conditioned the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. I wasn't sure which sentiment I wanted to use for the final project, so I went ahead and stamped a few of the sentiments down with clear embossing ink pad. Then I applied white embossing powder and used my heat tool to heat set the sentiment until it was nice and melted. And using the coordinating sentiment dies, I ran it through my die cutting machine. To create some dimension on the sentiment, I used a coordinating sentiment die to die cut a few extra pieces out of scrap chocolate truffle cardstock. I used liquid adhesive to layer the sentiments together. I then went ahead and adhered the layered sentiment to the card panel. Here I decided that I needed to add more interest. So I took the sentiment off the card panel and added white paint splatters to the entire card panel. Then I went back and adhered the sentiment back down. And this completes my vintage inspired card. I hope you found some inspiration in this tutorial and have some time to relax and craft in your craft space. Please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to get notified of any future tutorial videos. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.